The galaxy had never been so quiet. Where once there were bustling civilizations, now only ruins and silence remained. The stars flickered dimly in the distance, their lights the only remnants of a time long past. For centuries, the void had consumed everything in its path, swallowing entire star systems, extinguishing the bright flames of once thriving worlds. No one knew where it had come from or how to stop it. Its forces were relentless, an unstoppable tide of darkness that swept away all hope. Entire factions had fallen, their civilizations reduced to whispers, scattered across the broken remains of their home worlds. And then, Earth stood alone. Against all odds, humanity's homeworld had survived. Earth had weathered the storm when all seemed lost. While entire galaxies collapsed into chaos, Earth had shielded itself, protected by an ancient energy beneath its surface, a power no one understood, but one that had made it immune to the void's consuming grip. This power pulsed beneath the soil, a faint hum that resonated across the planet, guiding humanity towards something greater than they could have imagined. The news had spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Earth was no longer just a fragile, isolated planet. It was a beacon, the key to survival, and for the first time in centuries, a glimmer of hope emerged from the ashes. On the surface, Earth's leadership was grappling with the enormity of what had occurred. For decades, humanity had lived in the shadow of the void, building defenses, researching potential means of survival, and struggling against the crushing weight of impending extinction. The revelation of their planet's inexplicable immunity was a game changer. Earth's Council of Elders convened urgently, their discussions behind closed doors shrouded in secrecy. It was clear that the ancient energy beneath their feet was something far beyond their comprehension, but it was humanity's greatest asset. They knew they had to act quickly, before the galaxy's remnants realized what Earth had become and sought to claim the power for themselves. But Earth's survival wasn't just a matter of power, it was a matter of diplomacy. The galaxy was fractured, its factions distrustful of one another, each eyeing Earth with a mixture of envy and fear. Some saw Earth as a savior, the key to stopping the void's advance. Others saw it as a threat, an unknown force that could tip the balance of power in the galaxy. Humanity's emissaries, skilled diplomats, and tacticians chosen by the Council were tasked with one simple mission: unite the galaxy's survivors under Earth's banner before the void consumed them all. Their journey would take them across the galaxy to worlds on the brink of collapse, where alien civilizations clung desperately to survival. As the emissaries prepared for their journey, they stood before the Grand Vault, a massive underground chamber deep within the Earth, where the energy source had been discovered. The light emanating from it was both beautiful and terrifying, casting long, shifting shadows across the faces of those gathered. The power within it was palpable, like a pulsing heartbeat, and it filled the room with a sense of both awe and dread. Commander Elena Cortez, the leader of the emissaries, stood at the forefront. She was a woman of sharp mind and unyielding determination, chosen for her leadership qualities and unshakable faith in humanity's future. She had spent her entire career preparing for something like this, preparing for the moment when Earth would have to take its place in a galaxy at war. Now, as she looked at the others around her, she knew that everything they had worked for had led to this moment. The fate of the galaxy rested in their hands. "Are we ready?" she asked, her voice steady but tinged with the weight of responsibility. A chorus of affirmations echoed around her. Her team was ready. But deep inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were all standing on the edge of something far darker and more dangerous than any of them could truly comprehend. The galaxy was broken, and Earth was its last chance. But would they be able to hold it together, or would their planet's newfound power destroy them from within? As the emissaries boarded their ships and prepared to leave Earth's atmosphere, the planet below seemed to glow with an otherworldly radiance. The power beneath its surface pulsed in unison with the beating hearts of the crew. The journey ahead would be perilous, But Commander Cortez knew one thing for certain. Earth's light, however fragile, was the galaxy's last hope, and she was determined to ensure that light would never fade. The journey through the galaxy was not an easy one. The emissaries, led by Commander Ilana Cortez, had been briefed on the political instability of the factions they were about to encounter, but nothing could have prepared them for the fractured state of the galaxy's surviving civilizations. Earth's newfound power made them a beacon of hope, but it also made them a target. Every faction had their own agenda, and many saw the rise of humanity as either a salvation or a threat. Their first stop was Althera, a once proud empire now reduced to a collection of scattered colonies and battle-hardened survivors. It was a world of shimmering oceans and vast, craggy mountains, beautiful but empty, like a shattered jewel. The Altherans had long been at war with the Void, losing their homeworld and most of their fleet to its encroaching darkness. Those who remained were desperate, starving, and bitter. The emissaries were welcomed, barely. The Altheran Council, a group of hardened leaders, looked at Earth's representatives with wary eyes. Commander Cortez and her team were met with formal nods, but it was clear that beneath the surface, mistrust simmered. "Why should we trust you?" Jalrek, the Altheran general, demanded, his tone sharp. "Your people have only just discovered this power beneath your planet. What makes you think you can save us when we've been fighting for centuries?" Cortez stood her ground. "We don't claim to have all the answers, but Earth is surviving, and we want to help. We have the knowledge, the resources, and the will to unite the galaxy once again. You don't have to trust us. You just have to see the potential for what it is. If we don't act now, the Void will take everything." The room fell silent. The mention of the Void always struck a chord, but it was clear that the Altherans had their doubts. They had seen too many false promises in the past, and their survival had been a constant struggle. Before the meeting could proceed, alarms blared from the comms console, cutting through the tension like a knife. The Void was approaching. Panic rippled through the room as the emissaries scrambled to the war room, where a fleet of Void warships appeared on the long-range scanners, moving with terrifying speed. The Void was never far behind. It had a way of finding those who still held something worth taking. "We have no choice now," General Rex said, his face grim. "You wanted our trust. Prove it. Help us defend what little we have left." With no time to waste, Commander Cortez issued immediate orders to mobilize the Earth fleet. The emissaries, along with the remaining Altheran ships, formed a ragged defensive line in the system's outskirts. But the Void's fleet, dark and formless, moved as one, like a swarm of locusts descending upon a field. They were relentless, merciless. Their weapons tore through the Altheran defenses like paper, cutting a path toward their capital. In the heat of battle, as blaster fire streaked across the Void, Cortez realized just how little Earth's military forces were prepared for this level of warfare. The Void's sheer power was overwhelming, its ships seeming almost immune to the human and Altheran attacks. The emissaries fought valiantly, but their resources were limited. Earth's strength, however potent, was no match for the devastation of the Void. In the chaos of the skirmish, a deep voice crackled over the comms, an unexpected savior. The Altheran fleet's flagship, Call, had engaged its emergency jump drive and was able to carry the remaining fleet to a nearby uncharted moon, temporarily escaping the Void's reach. The victory was hollow, though, as they had lost several ships and the Void's relentless pursuit seemed inevitable. When they regrouped, Commander Cortez knew that their diplomatic mission had just become a military one. They could no longer afford to stand idly by while the galaxy crumbled. The alliance they sought would not be forged through promises alone. It would take strength, and it would take action. "Earth's light can guide us," Cortez said, her voice unwavering despite the uncertainty. "But we must be willing to fight for it. We must be willing to stand together, or the Void will take everything we have." Her words resonated deeply with the survivors of Althera and for the first time they began to believe. But their journey had only just begun. The galaxy was filled with factions. Some would bend to Earth's will, others would resist. And yet, no matter how strong or fragile these alliances were, the void was coming, and its hunger could not be denied. As the emissaries prepared to leave Alfera behind, Commander Cortez looked out at the star-filled sky. She knew the war was far from over. The galaxy was broken, but Earth's light was beginning to shine through the cracks, and it was up to them to make sure that light would never fade. After their harrowing escape from Alfera, Commander Ilana Cortez and her team made their way to their next destination, Thaler. Unlike Alfera, Thaler had been one of the wealthiest and most technologically advanced planets in the galaxy before the Void's arrival. But now, Thaler was a dying world, its cities dark, its once glittering towers reduced to ruins. The atmosphere was thick with smog, a byproduct of endless wars and industrial collapse. The people of Thaler were survivors, but their hope had long since withered. The emissaries' arrival was met with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. They were ushered into the capital's largest surviving hall, a grand chamber of stone and steel that once served as a symbol of Thaler's might. Now, it was a somber meeting place for the remnants of its ruling council. The leaders, weary and battle-scared, sat in a circle, their faces hollow from years of conflict and desperation. Admiral Hark Sovak, the leader of Thaler's defense forces, was the first to speak. His voice was hoarse, as if it had been worn down by the relentless strain of the galaxy's war. "What do you bring, Earth? Another broken promise? Another hollow alliance?" His eyes narrowed. "Our world is dying. Your light may shine, but can you save us from the war we've been waging for centuries?" Cortez stood tall, undeterred by the accusation. "We bring something more than promises. We bring the opportunity to rebuild. Earth has the power to unite us, to stand against the void and its endless hunger. But we can't do it alone. We need you, Thaler. You're not alone in this fight." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. The Thalaran leaders exchanged wary glances. They had fought countless wars against one another, and in the chaos had forgotten the true enemy. The void had consumed their resolve, turning them inward and eroding their unity. The thought of an alliance with Earth, something new, something unknown, was unsettling. Yet the specter of the void loomed large, and they knew they could no longer afford to remain divided. Admiral Sovak broke the silence. "We don't trust easily, and we've seen too many alliances crumble under the weight of false hope. But we're out of time." His gaze flicked to the large map displayed on the holographic screen, a map that showed the slow but inevitable expansion of the void. Before any more could be said, an alert pinged on their comms. The Void fleet had arrived. Thaler had no time to prepare. The emissaries and the Thalarans rushed to their ships, but as they launched into the sky, the Void opened before them, a field of swirling blackness that seemed to swallow everything in its path. The Thalaran fleet, though mighty, was no match for the Void's unrelenting power. The battle was chaos. The Thalaran ships fired their weapons, their shields flickering and sparking under the Void's assault. The Earth fleet, though inexperienced in this kind of battle, fought alongside them, using Earth's advanced technology and strategic tactics to push back the Void's forces, if only for a brief moment. Cortez's ship, the Horizon, was at the forefront, her crew working tirelessly to maintain their shields and fire on the approaching enemy. But the Void was relentless, its ships moving in a formation that seemed to stretch across the heavens like an unstoppable tide. It wasn't just an invasion, it was a purge. "Admiral Sovak, we need to push them back now." Cortez shouted into the comm, her voice urgent. "We've tried." Sovak's voice crackled back. "We don't have enough power to last. If we don't retreat." Before he could finish, a massive explosion tore through the Thalaran flagship, Vanguard, and the fleet's numbers began to dwindle. The Void had breached their last line of defense. Panic spread among the survivors as they realized their situation was growing more dire by the second. In that moment of desperation, Cortez made a decision. She ordered the Earth fleet to engage a high-risk maneuver. With her heart pounding, she turned to her crew. Prepare the jump drive, coordinates to the closest uncharted system. We're going to save what's left. It was a gamble, a desperate play to escape the Void's grasp and regroup. The fleet engaged its jump drives, their ships tearing through space with a brilliant flash of energy as they fled, leaving Thaler behind, its once proud cities now helpless before the Void's wrath. As the ships entered the safety of an uncharted star system, the survivors, Thalarin and Earth alike, stared at the dark void on their monitors, knowing that the fight was far from over. The void was relentless, and Earth's light, as bright as it was, could not do it alone. To defeat the void, they would need more than just power, they would need unity. Commander Cortez stood on the bridge, her face set with determination. We've lost too much already, but we're not finished. We will rebuild. Together, the emissaries now had one goal: to gather the remaining factions of the galaxy, to forge alliances where trust had been shattered, and to prepare for the ultimate battle against the darkness that threatened to devour everything. The galaxy was broken, but Earth's light would be the spark that ignited its rebirth. After narrowly escaping the Void's crushing assault on Thaler, Commander Ilana Cortez and her team knew that time was running out. The galaxy was disintegrating, its factions torn apart by the Void's advance and their own internal strife. The emissaries had gained the trust of some, Althera's survivors, the remnants of Thaler, but they needed more. They needed an alliance of strength and conviction. If Earth's light was to be the beacon of hope in the galaxy, it had to shine brighter than ever before. The next stop on their journey was a planet that had long been considered a myth, the Rift of Hope. A legendary world once home to an ancient race of peacekeepers known as the Jareth. The Jareth were said to have wielded unimaginable power, their knowledge of the stars and the universe far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was believed that their disappearance, centuries ago, was the result of a cataclysmic event triggered by the Void itself, a last-ditch effort to halt its expansion. However, in the midst of their darkest days, some believed that the Jareth had left behind a legacy, a secret weapon, hidden deep within the rift, that could turn the tide against the Void. "We have to find the rift," Cortez said, her eyes scanning the data on her screen. "If the Jareth left something behind, something powerful enough to defeat the Void, we need it." But the rift was not easy to locate. It was a shifting anomaly, moving through space like a phantom. No ship had ever entered its depths and returned, and many who had tried simply vanished without a trace. Yet the urgency of the situation made the risk necessary. The emissaries and their new allies, what remained of the Thalarin fleet and a few ships from Althera, set course for the rift. As they ventured deeper into uncharted space, the dark expanse of the galaxy seemed to grow colder, more oppressive. The Void's presence was everywhere, creeping on the edges of their sensors, an ever-present reminder of the impending doom. For days, the ships drifted through the Void, desperately scanning for signs of the rift. It was only when they reached the outer edges of a dense nebula, its colorful clouds swirling in strange patterns, that they finally saw it. A tear in the fabric of space, a rift in the stars, glowing faintly with an eerie, pulsing light. It was a hole in reality itself. "Hold steady," Cortez ordered. "Prepare for entry. The rift is unstable. No one knows what we'll find inside." The ships approached cautiously, navigating through the treacherous nebula. As they entered the rift's boundary, the stars around them twisted and bent, the space around them warping in ways that defied understanding. The ship's systems flickered as they passed through the distortion, the once familiar universe now twisted into a maze of strange shapes and colors. Then, at the heart of the rift, they saw it, a massive, floating structure, its architecture unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a city, or perhaps a temple, built with impossible symmetry, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. The Jareth had indeed left something behind, and it was now within their grasp. As the fleet moved closer, a deep, resonant hum filled the airwaves, a sound that seemed to reverberate through space itself. It was a signal, something alive within the rift, something ancient and powerful. Cortez ordered her team to disembark in smaller craft, eager to uncover the secrets within. As they landed on the surface of the structure, they were greeted by an eerie silence, broken only by the soft echo of their footsteps. The walls of the temple were etched with symbols, each one glowing with a soft, ethereal light. The air was thick with energy, a palpable force that seemed to hum with life. At the center of the temple stood a massive, crystalline obelisk, its surface covered in intricate carvings. It pulsed with the same energy as the rift, and Cortez felt an overwhelming sense of both awe and fear. This was no ordinary relic. This was the key, the weapon the Jareth had left behind. "Is this it?" asked one of the Altheran officers, his voice tinged with disbelief. "It's more than that," Cortez replied, her voice quiet but resolute. "This is the heart of the Jareth. Whatever they built here, whatever they left behind, it's the answer to everything." As they approached the obelisk, a sudden shift in the energy around them caused the walls to tremble. A low rumble echoed from deep within the structure, and then, to their shock, the obelisk began to react. Its surface cracked open, revealing a shimmering core, pulsating with light and power. The moment the core was exposed, the sky outside the rift began to darken, and the ship's sensors went wild. The void was coming, faster than they had anticipated. It had found them. "We don't have much time," Cordy said, her voice tense. "We need to activate this weapon now." But as the team worked to decipher the ancient Jareth technology, a haunting realization dawned. The weapon was not just a tool, it was a living force, a consciousness that had been dormant for centuries, waiting for someone to awaken it. The rift, the Jareth, the weapon, it was all connected. And now that it was awake, everything in the galaxy was about to change. But for better or worse, they were about to find out. The core of the Jareth obelisk pulsed with a brilliant light, its energy surging as if it were alive. The entire temple seemed to hum with the power emanating from it. Commander Ilana Cortez and her team stood frozen for a moment, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily upon them. The void was closing in, and yet the Jareth weapon, this mysterious, sentient force, was still unactivated. Cortez could feel the pressure of time running out, but the way forward was unclear. "We need to figure out how to trigger it," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "If this is the key, we can't waste another second." Her team, along with the few remaining Thalaran and Altheran soldiers, began scanning the obelisk's surface for any clues. The carvings etched into the structure seemed to shift and change as they examined them, their meaning unclear and constantly eluding them. Yet the hum of the core seemed to grow louder, almost as if it were responding to their presence, urging them to make contact. "Look at this," said one of the Thalaran engineers, pointing to a series of small symbols near the base of the obelisk. "These look like a form of Jareth writing, but it's not like any language we've encountered. It's interactive." Cortez approached cautiously, her fingers brushing lightly against the symbols. The moment she touched them, the obelisk hum intensified, and the light of the core flared up, almost blinding. A wave of energy shot outward, pushing everyone back as the temple trembled under the force of the awakening power. A voice, low and resonant, like the echo of a forgotten memory, filled the air. It was the voice of the Jareth, but distorted and fragmented, as if time itself had eroded its clarity. "Who dares disturb the eternal beacon?" the voice intoned, sending a chill down Cortez's spine. We are from Earth," she responded cautiously, taking a step forward. "We seek the power to fight the void. We need your help." The light dimmed slightly, as if considering her words. The voice continued, its tone growing darker, more foreboding. Help? You seek the power of destruction, of creation, of the impossible. But such power comes at a cost. The void is not the only enemy you face. The true threat lies within the hearts of those who would wield this force. Do you understand the price? Cortez's heart raced. She had known there would be consequences. Nothing this powerful could come without a price. But what was the true cost? I understand, she said, her voice steady, though doubt gnawed at her. We will bear any cost necessary. We will fight for the galaxy. The core's light dimmed further, and the voice seemed to laugh, a sound that resonated through the walls of the temple like the creaking of an ancient, forgotten machine. Then you shall fight, Commander Cortez. But understand this, the void is a symptom, not the disease. You awaken the weapon, but you also awaken what lies beneath. What you call the void is only one aspect of a far greater darkness that you cannot yet comprehend. The weapon will give you strength, but it will also draw you closer to the true enemy. Do you still wish to proceed? Cortez hesitated, her mind racing. She had come here with the hope of saving the galaxy, of rallying the scattered factions against the void, but now the stakes seemed even higher than she had imagined. If the weapon could not only defeat the void but also unleash something far worse, was the risk worth it? But then she thought of the billions of lives still trapped in the void's wake, the countless worlds that had already fallen, the survivors who looked to Earth for guidance, for strength. We must, she said finally, her voice resolute. We will do whatever it takes to stop the void, and whatever else may come. The core flashed once more, and the energy surged outward with incredible force, engulfing the entire temple. A violent shockwave rattled the surroundings, and the very fabric of space seemed to twist and warp. The floor beneath their feet cracked open, revealing a deep, dark chasm. As the light of the core reached its crescendo, the entire structure began to collapse, and the team scrambled to secure themselves. In that moment of chaos, Cortez knew that there was no turning back. They had awakened something ancient, something powerful, and they had no idea what it would cost them. But one thing was certain. Earth's light had just become a beacon for something far greater than they could have imagined. And whatever came next, they would face it together. The rift trembled with a new, darker energy. The void was closing in, but they had just unleashed a force that could change everything. As the energy from the Jareth obelisk dissipated, the once stable surroundings of the rift became chaotic. The entire temple was shaking violently, its ancient structure crumbling under the pressure of the power now unleashed. The pulse of the core grew louder, reverberating like the heartbeat of some ancient cosmic entity. The air itself seemed to warp, rippling with the sudden shift in space-time. Cortez and her team scrambled, their boots clanging against the cracked stone floors as they made their way toward the ship landing pads, the ground beneath them splitting apart with each tremor. The Jareth weapon, now fully awakened, had begun to manifest its full potential, but the consequences were immediate. The rift was no longer a mere anomaly. It had become a nexus, a source of energy that was rewriting the very rules of the galaxy. "Commander, we need to get out of here," shouted Captain Kale, one of the surviving Thalaran officers, as he pulled Cortez back from the yawning chasm that had formed in the temple's center. "Get the others to the ships," Cortez ordered, her voice firm, though the uncertainty of the moment pressed heavily on her. "We can't leave without the weapon." A deep guttural sound filled the air, an eerie primordial growl that seemed to come from the heart of the rift. It was a sound that chilled the soul. The Jareth weapon was alive, but it was not in control. There was something else, something ancient, that was stirring in the depths of the rift, a force far older than the void and more terrifying than anything Cortez had ever encountered. Her mind raced. She had been so focused on fighting the void, so convinced that the weapon would be their salvation, that she had failed to consider the full scope of the Jareth's power. They had not only created a weapon, they had created a conduit, a gateway to something far more dangerous. We've awakened something else, Cortez muttered to herself. Something worse than the void. Kale heard her words and gave her a worried look. What do you mean? What have we done? I don't know yet, she said, grimacing as the ground beneath their feet continued to tremble. But we've triggered something here. The rift, it's not just a weapon, it's a prison. Just as she spoke, the air around them seemed to distort, and a sharp, bright flash of light illuminated the rift. From within its depths, a vast shadow emerged, a colossal, shifting shape, blacker than the void itself, swirling with tendrils of dark energy. Cortez barely had time to react as a powerful force knocked her off her feet, sending her crashing to the ground. She looked up in horror as the shape took form. It was a colossal, monstrous being, its features obscured by the dark energy surrounding it. Its eyes glowed with an unholy fire, burning through the air as it gazed upon the intruders. This was no simple enemy, it was something born from the heart of the galaxy, something that had been trapped in the rift for eons. It opened its mouth, releasing a roar that shook the very fabric of space itself. The sound was a maddening combination of shrieks, growls, and a deep primal hunger that reverberated through Cortez's bones. The rift was no longer just a physical place. It had become a living, breathing entity, and it had been waiting. What is that thing? Kale gasped, his voice trembling in fear. Cortez pushed herself to her feet, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of the situation. It's the true source of the void, she whispered, realization dawning on her. The void wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was created by this thing. It's the catalyst, the force that has been devouring the galaxy. The monster, this ancient creature, had been imprisoned in the rift by the Zhirith, who had recognized the threat it posed. But now the seal was broken, and the creature was free to wreak havoc once more. We have to stop it, Cortez said, her voice determined. But we can't fight it with conventional weapons. We need the full power of the Zhirith weapon. As if on cue, the core of the Zhirith obelisk pulsed again, and the energy that had been flowing through the temple surged outward, drawn to the creature. The rift itself began to warp even more violently as the creature absorbed the power of the core. Commander, we need to leave now. Kale shouted as the ground beneath them cracked open even further, revealing an abyssal chasm that seemed to stretch on forever. But Cortez stood frozen, watching as the creature's form solidified, its energy becoming more concentrated. The Zhirith weapon had drawn it in, but in doing so, it had also unleashed its full potential. And now, the galaxy was facing its darkest moment, one where the choice was no longer between defeating the void and saving the galaxy. It was a choice between survival and destruction. The creature let out another deafening roar as it turned its gaze to the fleeing ships. And in that moment, the true battle for the galaxy began. The tides of power had shifted. Nothing would be the same again. Cortez turned to her team. Prepare to fight. This is it. The massive creature's eyes burned with a feral, predatory hunger as it loomed over the collapsing temple, its presence warping the air around it. The force of its energy sent shockwaves through the rift, shaking the very foundations of space and time. It was as though the creature itself was the embodiment of the galaxy's darkest fears, a primordial terror that had been unleashed from its ancient prison. Cortez could feel its gaze upon her, a suffocating pressure that threatened to crush her will. The Zhirith weapon had awakened it, and now, with its release, the galaxy was facing a reckoning unlike anything it had ever known. We need to hit it hard, Cortez muttered, her voice tight with urgency as she turned to Kale. We don't have time to waste. Her mind was racing. The creature, a force older than the void itself, was drawing power from the Zhirith obelisk's core, growing stronger by the second. And yet, Cortez could sense something else, a connection, a thread that bound the creature to the Zhirith technology. It wasn't just a mindless monster, it was a force of nature, a being whose purpose was to reshape the galaxy. The key to defeating it, she realized, lay in understanding the nature of that connection. "Commander," one of the engineers shouted, pointing toward the weapon. "The obelisk, it's unstable. If we don't stop it from channeling energy into the creature, it'll reach critical mass. We won't be able to contain the fallout." Cortez's heart raced as she turned to face the towering obelisk. The light from the core flared once more, and she could see the tendrils of energy snaking toward the creature, intertwining with its form. The creature was absorbing the energy, becoming more powerful with every passing second. "We need to sever the connection between the weapon and the creature," Cortez said, her voice resolute. "If we can disrupt the flow of power, we might be able to weaken it." "How do we do that?" Kale asked, his face grim. "We don't have the firepower to take it down." "We don't need firepower," Cortez replied, her eyes narrowing. "We need to break its connection to the Jareth technology. That's our only chance." She turned to the team of engineers and Thalaran soldiers. "Get to the control panels. We need to isolate the power conduits leaving from the obelisk. If we can cut off its energy supply, we can disrupt the creature's power source." The team sprang into action, moving with the precision of veterans, as the monstrous entity's roar echoed through the rift, a deafening sound that reverberated deep in their bones. Cortez glanced back at the creature, its form writhing in the swirling maelstrom of energy, its eyes now blazing with an unholy fury. "Kale, keep them covered," Cortez ordered. "We have no idea what this thing can do." Kale nodded, his weapon drawn and aimed at the creature, though it seemed like nothing could touch it now. The creature's body flickered in and out of existence, as though it were half missing from reality itself, its tendrils of darkness tearing through the air like destructive waves. The engineers worked frantically, but the power surging from the obelisk grew stronger, faster, overwhelming them. Cortez's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the creature drawing closer, its massive form blotting out the light. Every step it took caused the ground to shudder violently, and every movement sent tremors through the rift. It was only a matter of time before it reached them. "Commander," one of the engineers yelled, "we can't cut off the energy flow from this distance. We need to get closer to the obelisk." "Then we move in," Cortez said, gritting her teeth. "Prepare for a fight." With a decisive motion, Cortez sprinted toward the obelisk, her pulse quickening as the energy in the air crackled around her. The rest of the team followed her lead, weapons drawn and ready. The creature roared again, its presence overwhelming, but Cortez's resolve was unshaken. They had no choice but to confront it head-on. As they closed the distance between them and the obelisk, the creature's gaze snapped toward them, its fiery eyes locking onto Cortez. The ground beneath her feet buckled, sending shockwaves through the air as the creature unleashed a torrent of dark energy in her direction. "Move!" she shouted, diving to the side as the blast tore through the ground where she had been standing. The air around them thickened with the force of the attack, and for a moment, Cortez thought it might be the end. But she quickly pushed herself up, eyes locked on the obelisk, her focus unbroken. "Get to the power conduits," she ordered again, her voice a harsh command. "Now!" The team reached the obelisk's base, working quickly to access the control panels hidden beneath the ancient structure. The creature's energy pulses continued to destabilize the environment around them, but Cortez and her team worked through the chaos, determined to sever the connection. But the creature was not done yet. Its roars intensified, and with one final, earth-shattering scream, it surged forward, its dark energy reaching out to claim everything in its path. Cortez turned toward it, her heart pounding. This ends now. And with that, the final battle for the galaxy's survival began. The creature's roar reverberated through the rift, shaking the very air with a terrifying intensity. It surged forward, its tendrils of darkness ripping through the environment, warping reality itself as they reached for Cortez and her team. Every step it took sent shockwaves across the ground, and its eyes, glowing with the fiery hunger of the void, bore down on them, filling the air with the suffocating weight of its power. Cortez pushed herself forward, her mind focused, her body moving on pure instinct. The Jareth obelisk stood before her, the pulse of its core echoing like a heartbeat, strong, unwavering. She could feel the connection between the obelisk and the creature. It was the source of its power, the anchor that tethered the nightmare to the physical world. She had to sever it. They had to finish this. Now, Cortez shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos as she reached the control panel. Her hands moved with precision, inputting commands into the ancient interface. Sparks flew from the panel as it responded, the power flowing through the obelisk flickering. Behind her, Kale and the rest of the team kept the creature at bay, firing whatever weapons they had left into the writhing mass of darkness. But their efforts were in vain. The creature absorbed every strike, its form flickering in and out of existence, as though the very laws of physics no longer applied to it. The obelisk's core flared again, its light blinding, and Cortez's heart raced as she watched the energy begin to surge, more potent than ever before. The connection between the creature and the weapon was almost too strong to sever. The air thickened with static electricity, a storm of energy building to an unbearable crescendo. "Hold on," she yelled, knowing the stakes had never been higher. "We have to release the feedback loop." But as she pressed the final sequence into the panel, a violent force swept her off her feet. The creature was upon them, its dark tendrils sweeping across the battlefield like destructive waves. The ground cracked beneath her, and she fell, the air knocked from her lungs. The last thing she saw before the world around her spun into darkness was the glowing eyes of the creature, looming just above her. But Cortez's resolve never wavered. From the corner of her eye, she saw Kale pushing through the chaos, his voice a gritted snarl as he leaped to her side. "Commander, stay with me." The world around her was disorienting, but the sound of the obelisk's pulse was clear, cutting through the noise. The feedback loop had triggered. The connection was severing, the dark energy of the creature beginning to fracture as the Jareth weapon cycled into overload. The creature howled in rage, a deep, thunderous roar that shook the very fabric of space itself. Its body writhed, twisting violently as the very energy that had once sustained it now turned against it. The feedback from the obelisk's core began to destabilize the creature's form. The dark tendrils flailed, recoiling as the light from the Jareth weapon became blindingly intense. "It's working," Cortez gasped, her strength returning as the energy from the obelisk surged around her. She reached out and activated the final sequence, and with it, the very heart of the creature seemed to implode, its dark form collapsing into a vortex of pure destructive energy. The light intensified, growing brighter and brighter, as the rift itself seemed to tremble. For a moment, Cortez thought the entire galaxy would be swallowed by the explosion. But then, with a brilliant flash of white light, the creature was gone. Silence fell. Cortez lay on the ground, panting, her heart still racing. The once chaotic rift had fallen eerily still, the storm of energy dissipating. She could feel the weight lifting from her shoulders, as though the very fabric of the galaxy had exhaled. The team gathered around her, Kale helping her to her feet. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice low. Cortez stood, her eyes scanning the now still rift. The obelisk flickered faintly, its once dominant pulse dimming, the destructive energy having dissipated. "I think so," she said, her voice hoarse. "For now." But as she stared into the distance, Cortez felt the heavy weight of what they had done. They had defeated the creature, but the rift, the Jareth weapon, had changed the galaxy in ways that could not yet be understood. The events they had set in motion would ripple through the cosmos for generations. The galaxy was not what it had been before. "We've sealed the threat," Cortez said finally, her voice steady. "But the galaxy will never be the same. We've become the beacon now." Kale looked at her, his expression solemn. "We're the light in the dark." Cortez nodded. The eternal beacon was more than just the Jareth weapon. It was a symbol, a promise. The galaxy had been fractured, broken, consumed by darkness. But now, humanity had stepped into the void, lighting the way for those who still had hope. They had won, but their true journey was just beginning. The galaxy was theirs to shape, and they would not let the light fade.